about a girl, right, called Josinda. I know it's a very old-fashioned name, Josinda. You don't hear people these days called Josinda. These days we call her Jo or Jodie or something. But this is, yes, but this happened a long time ago. So, you know, it's Victorian night tonight, and Victorian was a time about 100 years ago, just more than 100 years ago, and that's when this little girl lived. And she was a little girl, and there were two things that she wanted. She desperately, desperately wanted. One was a pet, and the other was a beautiful fur hat. And now the reason that she wanted a beautiful fur hat was that Josinda lived with her mum, and they were poor people, very poor people. And her mum was the cook at a great big house. And in the big house, there lived a lord and lady and two children who were called the Little Honourables. The Honourable Timothy and the Honourable Henrietta. And every day, they all used to come down the drive, in the winter this was, just before Christmas. Every day in the school holidays, they used to walk past her window and they'd be wearing the most beautiful warm fur hats and fur gloves and lovely thick coats, and they'd go skating on the lake, which was just behind the little house where she lived with her mum. And she used to watch them and think, phew, all I've got is that tatty little scarf. And when I go out to play, I've just got this silly little scarf to wear. I've not got a lovely fur hat like they've got, because they're rich and I'm poor. And it's not fair, and I haven't even got a pet to talk to. And when my mummy is at work in the big house in the kitchen cooking, and I'm here by myself, watching them enjoy themselves out on the lake in all their lovely fur coats, it's not fair. So one day, there she was, looking out of the window, wishing like anything that she was rich and had a lovely fur hat like they did. And she could hear them squealing with laughter and joking and playing, and she could hear their nanny saying, "Now do be careful, Timothy. Don't go too far, Timothy. Do be careful." And then she heard the children squealing and laughing, and then all of a sudden she heard a real, terrible scream. So loud, she couldn't believe it, nearly burst her ears. And it was the nanny screaming, "No! No! Oh no!" And then she heard Henrietta, "Oh no, no, no!" And she thought, whatever is going on? And she looked out, and all she could see was where the ice had cracked on the lake. And there was little Timothy struggling in the water. She grabbed a blanket and ran from the house, carrying the blanket in her arms, and she ran down the path and down to the side of the lake where the children had been skating. And as the nanny and Henrietta pulled little Timothy out, and he was like this, he could hardly breathe, and he could hardly do anything, because he was just so frozen, having been in the water and nearly drowned. And so Josinda ran up to him and wrapped him fast in the blanket, right round, and said, "Bring him up to the cottage, bring him up to the cottage. I lit the fire earlier for when Mummy comes home. Just bring him up and let's get him warm and let's look after him." So they took him back up. And while Nanny stayed, they laid him down by the fire. Henrietta ran like anything back up to the house to tell her Mummy what was happening. Well, Josinda was very, very relieved to see that after a few minutes, his colour started to come back to normal. Timothy started to breathe properly again, and his lips weren't blue anymore. They started to go back to being pink, because he'd been so cold that his lips were actually blue. And he started to look okay. And then his eyelids fluttered and he opened his eyes and he looked round and he gave her a little tiny smile and she knew he was going to be all right. And she was just so glad. Well then, in rushed her ladyship with Henrietta. Oh, Timothy, oh, my poor little boy, oh, you nearly drowned, oh, this is terrible. And then she turned to Josinda and she said, how can I thank you? What would you like? Let me give you something lovely for Christmas. What would you like? Perfect thing. Josinda said, well, actually, what I'd really like is a fur hat, like the Honourables have got. Really? Really? You like a fur hat? Well, what excellent taste you have. I'm sure we can sort something out for you. Come up to the house tomorrow. And with that, off she went, Nanny carrying Timothy, Henrietta holding the ladyship's hand. Off they went back up to the big house. When Josinda's mum came home from work in the afternoon, Josinda told her all about it, all the excitement. And she said, well, you clever girl. Her ladyship was to be very pleased to invite you to go up to the house and to choose a hat. Josinda said, do you think they're going to give me one they've already worn? Well, I don't know, she said. But you'll have to wait and see. You go up tomorrow and you'll find out. So the next day, Josinda went up to the house. It was freezing cold and she had to put her horrid old scarf on to go up. She didn't want to at all. And she put the scarf on and she felt really fed up about it. But she thought, well, I'm going in this horrid old scarf. Well, I won't be coming back in that. I'll be coming back in a lovely fur hat. So she got up there to the house and she knocked on the door. And the butler came to the door and said, do come in. And he was expecting her. So in she went. And there was her ladyship and the two little Honourables sitting next to her. Oh, yes, she said, you've come for your hat, haven't you, dear? Yes, said Josinda. Oh, well, just a moment, she said. Joe! In came this old man, all bent and wearing old clothes, and he came stumbling in, and he said, right, come this way then. Follow me. I've come for a hat. I've come for a fur hat. Come with me. Nobody seemed to be saying don't, so she followed him. She followed him out of the house, path round the house, followed him down the path, across a yard, down by the stables, round the back of the stables, down through a long lawn, and at the bottom of the lawn she could see a big, long shed. Well, I wonder why they keep their hats in a shed. She thought, this is very weird, very peculiar. So Joe led her on down the path, opened the door to the shed, and said, right, come on now. Get me in there and choose the one you want. All right? Choose the one I want, she said. And she walked in. And what do you think she saw?